Flight attendant Belittles black woman says you people can't afford this CEO walks in. A hush fell over the bustling terminal as a poised, confident woman in a tailored burgundy pantsuit rolled her carry-on past the crowds. Her name was Naomi Russell, and she exuded an unshakable presence that turned heads, drawing both silent admiration and guarded curiosity. Little did she know her journey today would become a lightning rod of prejudice, power, and reckoning. Before boarding the flight, Naomi sensed an undercurrent of tension rippling through the airport staff, but she brushed it aside, determined to stay focused on the business opportunity waiting across the country. She never suspected that fate and a single cruel comment would set her life on a collision course with justice. Naomi Russell had arrived at John F. Kennedy International Airport hours before her Delta Airlines flight to Los Angeles. The morning sunshine caught on the polished floors, creating flickering reflections of passing travelers. Although she'd traveled often, this trip felt distinct, vibrating with a sense of import. Naomi worked as a project manager at a thriving tech startup. Her responsibilities involved forging partnerships, supervising expansions, and representing her company at conferences. On this particular occasion, she was headed to a critical West Coast meeting that could lay the foundation for a major collaborative deal. As she navigated the airport, every step crackled with quiet anticipation. Years of dedication had led to this moment. The venture capital group had asked for her personal presence to finalize negotiations for a lucrative round of funding. She was the perfect choice, calm under pressure, with an uncanny ability to tune out distractions. Meanwhile, in the quiet corridors of the airline's private offices, a different kind of energy brewed. Delta's CEO, Anthony Wilcox, was known for his unannounced visits to gauge the state of customer service. Today, he had decided to fly coach in secret, gleaning real feedback from everyday travelers. No one on staff, aside from a single confidant in senior leadership, had been informed of his presence. Naomi's mind wandered to her childhood in Newark. She remembered the cramped apartment with chipped paint walls and the constant roar of airplanes overhead. As a little girl, she used to stare at the sky, fascinated by the endless lines of white contrails. She would wonder what it felt like, gliding through the clouds, traveling to places so distant she could hardly imagine them. Her mother used to say, "Reach high, baby, and the skies will catch you." Those words were more than just encouragement. They were a promise. Over time, Naomi's ascension from a wide-eyed girl with humble beginnings into a self-assured professional felt like the realization of all those youthful dreams. Walking through the terminal, she noticed an older flight attendant at the coffee kiosk, smiling as she assisted a passenger. Naomi smiled to herself, recalling a time her mother had once cleaned airplanes for a living, dedicating countless overnight shifts in the hope her daughter would one day sit comfortably in first class. She purchased a latte and found a quiet corner by a tall window to review her notes. She needed to be sharp for the conference call she'd scheduled while waiting to board. The overhead speakers announced boarding for a flight to Miami. A family of 4 raced by, nearly toppling Naomi's luggage. "Sorry, ma'am," said the overwhelmed father, juggling a wriggling toddler. Naomi waved it off with a good-natured smile. Little moments like these reminded her that travel could be stressful, especially when kids were involved. She'd learned to adapt, remain patient, stay organized, and extend grace to others. By the time her phone chimed to remind her it was boarding time for Delta Flight 723 to Los Angeles, Naomi felt prepared and confident. She knew she'd reserved a first-class seat, an expense the company encouraged for this trip because it allowed her to work comfortably during the 5-hour flight. She headed to her gate, mentally rehearsing her proposal one last time. Gate 67B was flooded with people. A group of business travelers huddled around phone chargers, while a cluster of college students took turns napping atop their backpacks. A mother attempted to calm her crying baby, while a middle-aged couple admired postcards they'd bought. It was the typical airport tableau, yet Naomi felt a subtle tension pulsing beneath the mundane chaos. She noticed an anxious pair of eyes behind the check-in counter. The gate agent, a young man with a name tag that read Ethan, looked flustered. He kept glancing at someone behind him, a tall, statuesque flight attendant with a mane of sleek blonde hair. The flight attendant's name was Ariana Kent. The polite mask she wore seemed to slip whenever someone turned away. Her voice carried the clipped efficiency of a person used to commanding attention. But there was an edge to her mannerisms, a tightening of her jaw, a rolling of her eyes when she believed she was unobserved. Naomi set aside her observations, thinking it might just be pre-flight stress. She focused on her phone, scanning urgent text messages from her boss. Yet the uneasy feeling persisted. Sometimes gut instincts offer warnings that logic can't yet decode. Within minutes, boarding began for first-class passengers. Naomi calmly rose, retrieved her carry-on, and stepped into line. Ariana ushered the first batch of travelers down the jet bridge. At first, Ariana's greeting was smooth. "Welcome aboard," she chirped at a grey-haired man in a stylish business suit. Then she offered a bright smile and a nod to the next passenger, a well-dressed young woman in a crisp white blouse. Naomi approached, her ticket displayed on her phone. She smiled politely. Ariana's eyes flickered over Naomi's attire, a designer pantsuit, understated jewelry, then landed on the name on her screen. The transition was almost imperceptible. Ariana's lips twitched into a forced, tight-lipped grin. "Still," she said the standard lines. But Naomi detected a subtle ring of condescension. The contrast to Ariana's previous warmth with other first-class passengers caused Naomi to tense. She politely handed over her phone for verification, but Ariana seemed reluctant. Did Naomi sense a momentary glare of suspicion in Ariana's eyes? Possibly, but there was no time to dwell on it. Ariana stepped aside with a stiff, "Have a pleasant flight," ushering Naomi on board. Naomi breathed in, reminding herself that not every slight indicated deeper malice. People have bad days. This might be one for Ariana. Once on the plane, a flight attendant named Marcus helped Naomi stow her carry-on and locate her seat. His demeanor was the complete opposite of Ariana's warm, genuine, quick to assist. Naomi thanked him. Settling into 2A, she released a slow breath and tried to relax, letting the hum of the airplane's ventilation system soothe her. A few minutes later, the rest of the first-class cabin began to fill. A tall, athletic man took the seat next to Naomi, introducing himself as Roland. He explained he was a physical therapist traveling for a sports conference. Naomi found comfort in their easy conversation about traveling for work, especially in first class. Roland teased that once you went first class, it was hard to return to economy. Naomi nodded with a laugh. As the final boarding call approached, a hush spread through the first-class cabin. Ariana stepped forward, scanning the aisle, her gaze landing on Naomi and Roland. She made a visible show of adjusting her flight attendant's scarf and checking her manicure. There was something in her eyes, an undercurrent of disapproval, though it was fleeting. Naomi brushed off the impression and looked out the window. The day was too important to get mired in other people's negativity. Behind Naomi, a discreet man with salt and pepper hair slipped into seat 3C. He wore casual attire, blending in almost too well for a typical first-class passenger. This unassuming man was Anthony Wilcox, the CEO of Delta Airlines. He had wanted a ground-level perspective of his airline's operations, so he'd chosen a cross-country flight where no one recognized him. That anonymity gave him the freedom to observe. He leaned back, adjusting the baseball cap that partly concealed his face, and began to watch the cabin crew's interactions. The engines rumbled as the aircraft prepared for taxi. Ariana began the safety demonstration. Marcus, always bright-eyed, assisted politely. Passengers turned their attention to the front, though most frequent flyers only half listened. Yet Naomi felt Ariana's gaze linger on her again, even while Ariana spoke the memorized lines of the safety spiel. A darting look, a faint tightening of the lips, subtle gestures, but their repetition left Naomi uneasy. The plane lifted off the runway, climbing steadily into the sunlit sky. Naomi found comfort in the consistent mechanical whir, the seatbelt lightly snug across her waist. She'd practiced deep breathing whenever she felt tension. Right now, it proved helpful. Shortly after reaching cruising altitude, the cabin crew began their service. Ariana breezed down the aisle with a tray of drinks, wearing a mechanical smile and occasional warmth for certain passengers. When she reached Naomi and Roland, her tone cooled. She glanced at Naomi. "Beverage?" Ariana's voice was oddly devoid of warmth. Naomi kept her composure, politely responding, "Orange juice, please." Ariana poured the drink, setting the glass down without making eye contact. She then turned to Roland, brightening slightly. "And for you, sir?" Roland requested a sparkling water, which Ariana fetched with more enthusiasm. Naomi tried not to let it bother her, but she couldn't help noticing. The disparity in Ariana's attitude was increasingly evident. Roland, clearly sensing the tension, gave Naomi a supportive glance. Naomi tried to focus on her reading materials, spreadsheets, and marketing forecasts. But Ariana returned shortly with breakfast options. As she rattled off the choices, Naomi politely picked the omelette. Ariana, again wearing that frosty veneer, swiftly wrote it down and moved on. Naomi spotted the difference in how Ariana engaged with the next passenger, an older gentleman in 2C. Ariana teased him about his tie, calling it charming. She assured him with a gentle grin that she'd bring his meal promptly. It struck Naomi that Ariana's warmth was inconsistent. She was courteous to certain passengers, not to others. The difference was starkest toward Naomi. Why? Naomi had plenty of experience with microaggressions. She decided it might be best to stay quiet and keep the peace for the remainder of the flight, especially since she needed to work on her laptop. Despite her decision to ignore the situation, the next encounter was impossible to let slide. Ariana came around, distributing hot towels. She nearly skipped Naomi. When Naomi extended her hand for a towel, Ariana all but dropped it into Naomi's lap, leaving a small splash of water on Naomi's seat. It wasn't enough to cause a large mess, but it was enough to make Roland frown. Naomi's cheeks warmed. She considered speaking up, but worried it might escalate. Roland leaned in and whispered, "Is she always this hostile?" Naomi shook her head slightly, as if to say she had no explanation. A middle-aged woman in the row across from them, wearing a black floral blouse, caught Naomi's eye. She too had witnessed Ariana's subtle antagonism. She offered Naomi a sympathetic smile. It felt like a silent show of support, a reassurance that Naomi wasn't imagining things. From seat 3C, Anthony Wilcox caught these interactions as well. He discreetly took notes metaphorically and literally. His smartphone had a little note-taking app, and he jotted impressions about crew conduct. Ariana's favoritism, or reverse favoritism, was glaring. He had no intention of intervening yet. The flight had just started, and he wanted to see how matters developed. After breakfast service, the cabin lights dimmed for those wishing to rest. Naomi opened her laptop, adjusting the tray table to a comfortable position. She felt the swirl of negativity pushing against her focus. There was a big presentation waiting, and the last thing she needed was to get riled up over a flight attendant's rude behavior. Yet the tension in the cabin was mounting. Passengers began exchanging glances. Ariana's disapproving body language toward Naomi became more pronounced. At one point, Ariana asked Roland if he needed anything else. He politely declined. She asked Naomi the same, but in a monotone voice that made it clear she expected the answer to be no. Naomi replied with a slight smile. Actually, could I have some more water, please? Ariana paused, her expression souring. She returned several minutes later, but her annoyance was palpable. She handed Naomi the cup, sloshing a bit onto Naomi's tray. Naomi bit her lip, repressing any strong reaction. Eventually, Ariana approached Naomi as she was typing away on her laptop. "We're collecting rubbish," Ariana said curtly. She didn't use please or thank you. Naomi nodded, handing over the empty cup. Ariana's eyes flickered over Naomi's Apple MacBook, the crisp business documents displayed on the screen. There was a momentary sneer, so fleeting Naomi almost doubted she saw it. Then Ariana's low whisper came, "I'm sure it's not polite to keep your tray table down if you're not actively eating." Naomi looked at her, confused. Other passengers had trays down as they worked on laptops or read. "Pardon me?" Naomi asked, not wanting to escalate but needing clarity. Ariana's reply was calm, yet laced with condescension. "I said, it's best practice to stow the tray table when not in use. We want to maintain a safe environment, especially for those who actually paid for their seats." Naomi's heart skipped. The insinuation was obvious. Ariana was implying Naomi didn't belong there. And that little "you people can't afford this seat" vibe lingered in the flight attendant's tone, though not spoken outright yet. Naomi took a steadying breath. "I am using it," she said softly. "I'm working on a presentation, and yes, I did pay for this seat." Ariana tilted her head, as though she found Naomi's response surprising. She said nothing more but moved on, letting her silence cut deeper. Naomi exhaled slowly. Another passenger caught Naomi's gaze and shook their head disapprovingly at Ariana's conduct. Not long afterward, Ariana served the mid-flight snack. Naomi removed her headphones to hear Ariana talking to another flight attendant. The words drifted through the aisle, occasionally overshadowed by engine noise, but Naomi caught phrases like, "Some passengers think they're entitled, and I'm sure it's not even her seat." Naomi's ears burned with humiliation. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind raced. How should she handle this? Should she inform Marcus or try to speak with Ariana directly? No one should endure such disrespect, especially not from a service professional. Roland leaned over. "I've been on dozens of flights, and I've never seen anything like this." "Are you sure you're okay?" he whispered. Naomi pressed her lips together. "I'm trying to stay calm, but this is unacceptable," she replied. At that moment, Ariana came by again, obviously eavesdropping. She must have heard Roland's remark. Her gaze zeroed in on Naomi. Then, in a sudden burst of frustration, Ariana snapped. In a voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear, she said, "Look, if you have a problem, maybe you should move back to economy where you belong. Some people pay a premium to be here and expect a certain atmosphere." Stunned silence. Every passenger in the first-class cabin froze. Roland's eyes widened in shock. The woman across the aisle gasped. Even from row 3, Anthony Wilcox jolted, tension in his shoulders as he realized Ariana had crossed a dangerous line. Naomi's chest tightened. She felt her face flush, mortified and furious all at once. Trying to maintain dignity, Naomi responded, "Excuse me? There's absolutely no cause for you to speak to me like that." Her voice shook only slightly. Ariana's smile was thin, almost venomous. "No cause? My job is to ensure our first-class cabin remains comfortable for people who belong here. If you don't like it, maybe you can just..." She paused abruptly, perhaps realizing she was about to utter something unspeakably cruel. The damage was done, though. The entire row had heard Ariana's insinuation. The air felt electric, as if a storm were about to break. Ariana huffed and turned on her heels, leaving Naomi in a swirl of disbelief. From seat 3C, Anthony Wilcox slowly rose. A primal sense of protectiveness flared in him. But he also recognized that if he confronted Ariana in front of everyone right now, the situation might explode. He needed to handle this carefully, to witness more, to gather everything he needed to address the matter decisively. The flight droned on. Passengers glanced at Naomi with empathy, and some with a quiet sense of outrage. Roland offered to call over the other flight attendant, Marcus. Naomi nodded and Marcus appeared, concern etched on his face. He had heard rumors of friction but had been tied up assisting economy class. "Miss Russell, is there anything I can do for you right now?" Marcus asked gently. Naomi sighed, rubbing her temples. She explained in a low voice the gist of Ariana's remarks, choosing her words carefully to avoid sounding hysterical. She emphasized that she merely wanted a peaceful flight. Marcus's face darkened with understanding. He apologized on behalf of the airline and promised to speak to Ariana. However, Ariana's overt hostility had created a tension that wouldn't vanish easily. Naomi leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. She tried to recall her mother's words about grace, about rising above, but her hands trembled. Her laptop lay abandoned on the tray, her concentration shattered. She thought of the countless microaggressions she'd faced over the years, from teachers doubting her capabilities in high school to corporate colleagues who'd seemed surprised by her intelligence. Yet nothing had been quite as blatant as this. "You people can't afford this," that phrase echoed in her mind, though Ariana hadn't said it verbatim yet. It felt implied in every sneer, every biting remark. At this point, other passengers in first class quietly rallied around Naomi. Roland ordered a glass of champagne for her, wanting to soothe her nerves. The floral blouse woman across the aisle reached over to pat Naomi's arm in silent solidarity. Even the older gentleman in 2C tossed Ariana a frosty glare when she passed by. Under normal circumstances, Ariana's job was to ensure passengers felt valued and comfortable. Now the entire atmosphere was fraught with disquiet, overshadowed by Ariana's prejudice. Anthony Wilcox took mental notes. This was precisely the type of incident that could tank an airline's reputation if it went viral. As CEO, he was furious. He wanted to address it swiftly, but he also recognized that Ariana's unprofessionalism needed to fully surface for him to have an irrefutable reason to intervene. Even if he was the CEO, he had to handle disciplinary matters in a way that stuck. He decided to let Ariana's meltdown reach its peak. Time dragged. Naomi nibbled half-heartedly on a cookie from the snack basket. She kept her eyes fixed on the seatbelt, sign above, counting the minutes until they landed. However, a single question haunted her: should she stand up for herself more forcefully? Part of her demanded she not let Ariana's remarks go unanswered, while another part reminded her of her professional obligations once she reached LA. She needed a clear head, not a confrontation. An hour later, the seatbelt sign illuminated as the plane hit turbulence over the Midwest. Ariana walked through the aisle, instructing passengers to remain seated. When she reached Naomi's row, she paused. Naomi was bracing against the mild bumps, her laptop stowed, eyes on the clouds outside. Ariana leaned in. Her voice snide but quiet enough not to attract immediate attention. "I have no idea how you managed to sneak into first class, but if you don't start acting appropriately, I will have you escorted to another seat. Do you understand?" Naomi's temper flared. She turned, shock and anger colliding. "Are you serious right now? How dare you threaten me like that? I've done nothing wrong." Ariana's eyes flickered dangerously. "I've seen it before. People booking economy tickets, then sneaking into premium cabins. I've got my eye on you." That was the final straw. Naomi unbuckled her seatbelt, ignoring the turbulence, and stood, though it took effort to keep her balance in the rocking plane. Roland, alarmed, grabbed her arm to steady her. Naomi locked eyes with Ariana. "I paid for this seat," she said, her voice resonating with the frustration of 1,000 silent cuts. "Your behavior has been inappropriate from the start. I'm done letting it slide." Ariana opened her mouth to deliver a retort. That was when Anthony Wilcox emerged behind her, stepping into the row. He spoke in a calm but commanding tone. "Is there a problem here?" Ariana spun, prepared to snap at whoever had dared interject. But her words died on her lips as she beheld Anthony. She had no idea who he was, but something in his bearing demanded respect. "I'm handling a situation with this." "Passenger?" Ariana managed, her tone forced. Anthony nodded slowly, scanning Ariana's face, then turning to Naomi. "You seem distressed, ma'am. Is everything all right?" he asked, feigning the role of a concerned fellow passenger rather than a top executive. Naomi's voice shook slightly as she explained the repeated discrimination, the belittling remarks, the threat to remove her from the cabin. Several bystanders nodded in agreement, verifying her account. Ariana's cheeks flushed as Anthony stared at her. She straightened her shoulders, attempting to defend herself. "I'm just ensuring our policies are followed," she said. "We have to make sure people are seated in their correct sections." "It's my job," Roland spoke up, anger threading through his voice. "I'm in the seat next to her. I saw everything from the start. She hasn't done a single thing wrong. You've been targeting her from the minute she walked on." Ariana's composure began to crumble. "Well, maybe I misunderstood." At that moment, the plane jerked from a strong air pocket, reminding everyone they were mid-flight. Marcus rushed forward to intervene, but Anthony raised a hand to indicate he'd manage. Marcus stepped back, uncertain. The tension had reached a critical point. Anthony's voice carried a chilly edge. "Given that we're experiencing turbulence, we should all be seated. But let me be very clear. Threatening to remove a passenger from a paid seat without just cause is unacceptable. If it happens again, there will be consequences." Ariana bristled, confusion knitting her brow. "And who exactly are you to make that call?" she shot back, struggling to keep her tone polite. She was obviously outraged that a passenger would dare talk to her in such a way. With measured calm, Anthony replied, "For now, let's just say I'm someone who cares a great deal about how customers are treated on Delta Airlines." He then turned to Naomi. "Please take your seat, ma'am. I assure you, you won't be removed from this cabin. I'll personally see to it." Naomi nodded, her heart pounding, and sat down. Ariana's mouth opened as if to argue, but a stern look from Anthony halted her. The sense of finality in his expression made it clear this was not a fight Ariana could win. The turbulence subsided. Ariana retreated to the galley, her mind racing. Something about that man, he carried himself with a quiet power, and she felt as though she had made a catastrophic miscalculation by insulting him. She fidgeted with her uniform scarf, rummaging for something to calm her nerves. She noticed Marcus standing nearby, arms crossed. "That was uncalled for, Ariana," Marcus said in a low voice. "You can't single out passengers like this. She's done nothing wrong. It's one thing to suspect seat upgrades, but you need proof. Besides, your personal bias is showing." Ariana glared. "Personal bias? Don't be ridiculous. I have a gut feeling she's not supposed to be there." "Why else would she be so defensive?" Marcus lowered his voice further. "I think you'd better watch your tone. Whoever that man is, he seems like a big deal, and your behavior is out of line. We're flight attendants, Ariana, not the seat police. If there was a legitimate issue, the manifest would confirm it." Ariana's jaw tightened. She knew the manifest did indeed list Naomi Russell in seat 2A, paid in full, but a gnawing prejudice inside her refused to let her back down. She'd grown up believing certain stereotypes, and seeing a successful black woman in first class rubbed her the wrong way, igniting an irrational cynicism she herself barely understood. Ariana told herself it was about company policy or passenger fairness, but deep down, the uglier reality was that she just couldn't fathom a woman like Naomi legitimately affording the seat. Now, she sensed she'd awakened a hornet's nest, especially with that mysterious passenger scolding her as if he was in charge. In the galley, Ariana flashed back to her own struggles. She'd come from a small town in rural Texas, her parents scraping by with low-wage jobs. Determined not to live that life, Ariana had moved to a bustling city after high school, took out loans for flight attendant training, and clawed her way into a stable career. She'd endured belittling remarks from wealthy passengers for years. Perhaps, twisted by those humiliations, she now projected scorn onto anyone who didn't fit her mental image of a typical premium customer. But Ariana's anger masked a deeper insecurity. She felt a need to control the environment around her, to protect herself from being looked down upon ever again. In Naomi's confidence, Ariana perceived a threat. The professional, self-assured manner Naomi carried reminded Ariana of all the times she'd been made to feel small. Instead of empathizing, Ariana let bitterness guide her. Yet Ariana had reached a tipping point. She realized an entire cabin of witnesses had seen her meltdown. The consequences could be dire. She paced in the galley, eyes darting. Should she apologize to Naomi? Should she do damage control? Her pride bristled at the idea. "We'll land soon enough," she muttered to herself. "Maybe I can fix this before the flight ends." Meanwhile, Naomi sat stiffly, tears threatening to well up as the adrenaline wore off. She rarely cried, especially not in public, but the humiliation was overwhelming. The older gentleman in 2C leaned over, whispering his support and offering to vouch for her if she wanted to file a complaint. Roland gently patted her shoulder. Naomi nodded, murmuring her appreciation. She realized she wasn't alone in this. The entire cabin's empathy felt like a warm cloak around her. She also felt a seething sense of injustice. Maybe it wasn't just about her personal pride. Maybe it was about standing up against prejudice, so it didn't happen to the next person. As she scanned the cabin, her eyes briefly met Anthony Wilcox's. He nodded once, as if silently assuring her everything would be all right. Unable to focus on her work, Naomi shut her laptop. She tried to center herself. Through the window, the sun peeked from behind thick clouds. She watched them swirl below, mesmerizing in their ephemeral beauty. She thought about her mother's old adage, "Rise above." Naomi repeated those words internally, longing for the moment this ordeal would be behind her. An hour before landing, Ariana hesitantly returned to first class. She refilled passengers' drinks and offered lukewarm apologies if they seemed dissatisfied. When she arrived at Naomi's seat, she stiffened. "Do you want anything?" Ariana asked. Her voice clipped. Naomi considered responding but decided to remain civil. "I'm fine," she said, not meeting Ariana's eyes. There was no warmth, just an uneasy stalemate. Ariana moved on to Anthony Wilcox's row. "Anything for you, sir?" Ariana asked. He looked up, removing the baseball cap. In that instant, Ariana's eyes widened. Recognition flickered across her face. Anthony Wilcox, the CEO of Delta Airlines. The color drained from Ariana's cheeks. Anthony studied her for a moment, a stern expression etched on his features. "Yes," he said softly. "I'd like to talk with you after you finish your service." Ariana swallowed hard. She stammered a yes, of course. Then she hurried away, her mind whirling in panic. All the rumors she'd heard about Anthony Wilcox flashed before her. He was known for being fair, but uncompromising on issues of discrimination. Ariana felt a wave of nausea. She realized the gravity of what she'd done. The plane began its descent toward Los Angeles International Airport. Over the intercom, the pilot announced their approach and asked everyone to prepare for landing. Naomi buckled her seatbelt, tension coiling in her stomach. She was relieved the ordeal would soon be over, but also uncertain what might happen once they touched the ground. Anthony stood quietly, retrieving his carry-on from the overhead bin. He handed Marcus a business card and whispered something. Marcus nodded, comprehension lighting his face. Ariana lurked near the galley, scanning the cabin with a mixture of dread and resignation. As wheels touched down with a jolt, the entire plane gave a sigh of relief. Passengers began powering up phones, retrieving bags from overhead compartments, and exchanging final pleasantries. Naomi checked her phone, a barrage of emails, missed calls, and texts from her boss. She let out a long exhale, ready to step off this flight and refocus on her work. But fate had one more scene to play out. The seatbelt sign dimmed and passengers stood. Anthony Wilcox made his way to the front of the cabin, politely but firmly beckoning Ariana to join him at the jet bridge. Naomi, Roland, Marcus, and several other first-class passengers hesitated, curious. Ariana followed Anthony, her eyes downcast. At the threshold of the aircraft door, Anthony turned. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have a moment, please," he said, his voice calm but brimming with authority. Murmurs spread as passengers realized the man they'd seen was no mere traveler. Ariana's face went pale as Anthony addressed her in front of everyone, but especially in front of Naomi. A tense hush blanketed the first-class cabin as Anthony Wilcox cleared his throat, his gaze traveling slowly across the faces of stunned passengers. Ariana stood by the aircraft door, her posture rigid, eyes darting between Naomi and the tall man, exuding an air of quiet authority. She was unprepared for what came next. "My name is Anthony Wilcox," he announced, his voice measured but resonating with unmistakable command, "and I am the CEO of Delta Airlines. I happen to be on this flight, observing the quality of our customer service in an unofficial capacity." A collective gasp rippled through the aisle. Business travelers, casual flyers, and the flight crew alike froze in astonishment. Several passengers exchanged triumphant looks, as though relieved they could finally trust that justice was at hand. Naomi's eyes widened. She had felt there was something different about him, but she never could have guessed his true identity. Roland, standing nearby, exhaled sharply, his tension melting into a flash of vindication. Anthony continued, his tone firm as steel. "In the course of this flight, I've witnessed several troubling interactions between Miss Ariana Kent and Miss Naomi Russell. Miss Kent, your words and your actions have been deeply unprofessional, discriminatory, and in direct violation of the core values we uphold at Delta. By threatening to remove a paid, law-abiding passenger from first class based on unfounded assumptions and personal prejudice, you've crossed a line we cannot ignore." Ariana's shoulders slumped, and her lip quivered as she tried to muster a response. She looked to her fellow flight attendants for any form of support, but Marcus merely bowed his head, avoiding her gaze. A few passengers glared openly, others watched in silence, fixated by the gravity of the moment. Anthony's voice rang out again, unwavering. "Delta Airlines does not, and will not, tolerate racism or discrimination in any form. Our mission is to provide safe, respectful travel for everyone who steps onto our planes. You have severely violated those principles today." Ariana's eyes pooled with tears, her carefully composed facade finally shattering. She whispered, "Sir, I messed up. I truly did. I'm so sorry." Her usual briskness and the entitlement she had displayed earlier were gone. Only a raw, trembling remorse remained. But Anthony's expression remained resolute. "I appreciate that you admit fault, Miss Kent, but actions carry consequences. Effective immediately, you are suspended from duty pending a full investigation." We have multiple eyewitness accounts of what occurred here, and we will proceed accordingly." Ariana gasped, the color draining from her face. She looked around, desperately seeking a reprieve, yet she found no sympathetic faces. The older gentleman in 2C, who had witnessed her scornful comments, shook his head. A woman in a floral blouse discreetly slipped closer to Naomi, as if silently showing support. Marcus, standing a short distance away, exhaled and returned to focusing on disembarking procedures. Anthony shifted his attention to Naomi, stepping forward with composed empathy. Passengers parted to give him room. "Miss Russell," he began gently, "allow me to extend my sincerest apologies on behalf of Delta Airlines. No one should ever experience such demeaning treatment. We owe you much more than an apology, and I assure you the company will make every effort to address this incident swiftly and fairly." Naomi swallowed hard, a swirl of relief and lingering hurt making her voice tremble. "Thank you. I appreciate you speaking up," she managed. "I only wanted a peaceful flight and respect like any other passenger. You deserved far better than what happened here," Anthony replied, his tone warm but steady. "We will reimburse you fully for this flight, grant you additional travel credits, and if there's anything else you need, be it logistical support, further compensation, or simply an opportunity to voice your concerns, I encourage you to reach out. My card has all the direct contacts you'll need." He offered a business card with both hands, a personal gesture rarely seen by high-level executives. Naomi accepted the card, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. She'd come onto this flight expecting an ordinary journey, but it had been anything but that. Glancing around, she noticed a few other passengers nodding at her, some offering small smiles of solidarity. A faint applause broke out, tentative at first, then growing, acknowledging both Naomi's dignity in handling the situation and Anthony's decisive intervention. Ariana, standing off to the side, appeared lost, as though she wasn't sure where to place her feet or how to hold herself. She could feel the eyes of the entire first-class cabin and the rest of the aircraft behind them focused on her. Embarrassment, regret, and a faint flicker of resentment warred on her features. In a matter of hours, she had gone from a commanding presence in the cabin to a pariah facing suspension. Anthony inclined his head to Ariana. "Please follow the standard protocol upon arrival. We'll have management waiting to speak with you." Tears finally spilled down Ariana's cheeks. She recognized that a single moment of bias and harsh words, repeatedly expressed, had undone years of effort she had invested in her career. She mumbled, "Yes, sir," and moved aside, allowing the passengers to disembark. As Naomi gathered her bag, Anthony offered one last, sincere apology, looking her in the eye. "We can't change what happened today, Miss Russell, but I give you my word that Delta will learn from it and do better." Naomi nodded, still reeling. "Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. That's all I can ask." With that, the flight's drama reached its poignant conclusion. Passengers began to exit the aircraft, each of them carrying away their own perspective on what they had just witnessed, a public reckoning where prejudice was confronted head-on, and those harmed were given a modicum of justice. The cabin door finally opened onto the bright corridor of the jet bridge, and the world beyond beckoned. The storm of tension remained palpable in the air, but Naomi walked away with her head high, vindicated, supported, and resolved to move forward. Once the passengers began deplaning, Ariana had to stand by as they each exited, many throwing her disapproving glances. Rumors swept the cabin that she would be escorted to a management office immediately upon disembarking. Her fellow crew members kept their distance, unwilling to be associated with her misconduct. Marcus patted Ariana's shoulder in passing, murmuring, "I hope you learn from this. Good luck." She swallowed, tears threatening once more. She could practically hear the wheels of corporate discipline turning. She'd likely lose her job, or at the very least, her flight privileges would be severely cut. That meant No more glamorous overnights in Paris or weekend layovers in Tokyo. Her dream job, her escape from a difficult life, was collapsing before her eyes, all because she couldn't check her prejudice. Meanwhile, Naomi disembarked, passing Ariana on the way out. Their eyes briefly met. For a second, Ariana looked on the verge of saying something, but the words never formed. Naomi gave a small, solemn nod, neither triumphant nor forgiving, just an acknowledgement that this saga was at an end. Then she walked away, relief slowly washing over her like the first breath of fresh air after a storm. Down the jet bridge, Anthony Wilcox caught up with Naomi. "Miss Russell," he said, gently placing a hand on her shoulder to get her attention, "please allow my staff to escort you to the Sky Lounge. I'd like to sit down with you and hear more about your experience, if you have the time." Naomi checked her watch. Her next meeting wasn't until late afternoon. Despite the emotional strain, she recognized the importance of speaking with the CEO. "Yes, of course," she replied softly. Anthony signaled for a customer service manager, who whisked Naomi to the nearest Sky Lounge. There, they found a private meeting room. Over bottled water and the hush of quietly conversing travelers, Naomi recounted the events in more detail. Anthony took notes, apologized repeatedly, and promised thorough action. "This has been an eye-opening experience for me as well," he admitted, a trace of sadness in his eyes. "No matter how many company policies we put in place, sometimes prejudice festers under the surface. I'm determined to root it out." Naomi appreciated his sincerity. Though she couldn't forget Ariana's venomous words, seeing the CEO's resolve gave her a measure of hope. As they wrapped up the conversation, Anthony offered additional compensation to cover any emotional distress, but Naomi gently declined. "A public apology and assurance that you'll address these issues is enough," she said. Her shoulders relaxed for the first time in hours. "I just want to believe it won't happen to another passenger." After exchanging farewells, Naomi stepped out of the Sky Lounge, the midday sun pouring through the towering windows of LAX. She felt emotionally drained, yet oddly empowered. A swirl of messages from her colleagues awaited on her phone, but for once, she decided to pause. She took a moment for herself, gazing at the planes taxiing on the runways. She recalled that little girl in Newark who used to watch airplanes overhead. Was this outcome a testament to how far she'd come? She recognized that while she'd been the target of prejudice, she'd also been supported by decent people who refused to be silent witnesses. Roland, Marcus, the older gentleman in 2C, the floral blouse woman, even Anthony Wilcox, each had intervened or shown solidarity in their own way. Their actions reminded her that not everyone in the world was hateful or indifferent. Naomi then mustered her courage and hopped into a ride-share vehicle, heading to her crucial business meeting downtown. She refused to let Ariana's venom overshadow her hard-earned accomplishments. Naomi was resolute. She would walk into that conference with her head high, delivering a stellar presentation, forging new alliances, and continuing her trajectory of success. Ariana faced the music. Delta's disciplinary board opened a formal investigation. Witness statements poured in from first-class passengers, Marcus, and even the pilot, who heard about the confrontation from multiple sources. Ariana was put on indefinite leave. Her flight benefits were revoked pending the review. The union rep informed her that it would be extremely hard to protect her position given the severity of the allegations and the multiple eyewitness accounts. Haunted by regret, Ariana experienced her own personal unraveling. She spent sleepless nights replaying her actions, trying to parse how her prejudice had escalated into a full-blown meltdown. The day after the flight, she woke to find her phone inundated with calls from colleagues, each delivering a mixture of shock, pity, and scolding. People whispered that she might never wear the Delta uniform again. Days turned into weeks. The story leaked onto social media, where it spread quickly. Passengers who had been on the flight posted about the flight attendant who belittled a black woman. Some mentioned that the CEO himself had intervened. Ariana found her name trending briefly on Twitter, which sparked an avalanche of hateful comments toward her. Ironically, Ariana now experienced the sting of public scorn, a fraction of the humiliation she had inflicted on Naomi. Meanwhile, Naomi fielded requests for interviews from local news channels and online bloggers. She declined most, wanting to retain her privacy and focus on her work. The few times she spoke about it, she emphasized that while Ariana's behavior was abhorrent, the swift action taken by Delta's leadership was a promising sign that not all institutions tolerated bigotry. That balanced perspective garnered her respect. In a final blow of karmic irony, Ariana's suspension eventually turned into a termination. Without her job, she faced mounting bills. Her illusions of a high-flying lifestyle crumbled. She tried to apply for positions at other airlines, but the references she received were lukewarm at best. The entire fiasco followed her like a dark cloud. She moved back to her hometown temporarily, grappling with the consequences of her choices. In quiet moments, she admitted to herself that her prejudice had cost her everything she'd worked for. Life, however, continued for Naomi Russell. The meeting in Los Angeles went phenomenally well. Her poised delivery and unwavering confidence impressed the venture capitalists, leading to a substantial investment in her company. The board recognized her exemplary negotiation skills, and soon Naomi was named Director of Strategic Partnerships. She leveraged her new position to push for inclusivity within her own corporate culture, ensuring employees from all backgrounds felt seen and valued. Weeks later, she found herself preparing for another trip, this time to a European tech conference in Berlin. She debated whether to fly Delta again, but eventually chose to, partly because she believed in the changes Anthony Wilcox had promised. Sure enough, her next Delta flight experience was a complete 180. From check-in to landing, the staff was courteous and professional. Naomi boarded, uncertain if any flight attendants recognized her from the viral story, but even if they did, they showed no sign of it. She settled into her seat again, in first class, and felt a sense of peace. During that flight, Naomi reflected on the cyclical nature of karma. Ariana had tried to belittle her, to reduce her worth, but in doing so, Ariana had only accelerated her own downfall. Naomi realized that standing up for herself, albeit under extraordinary circumstances, had also shined a light on a broader issue within the airline industry. She hoped other airlines would follow Delta's lead in addressing discrimination swiftly and transparently. Anthony Wilcox reached out one final time, inviting Naomi to serve on a newly formed advisory panel focused on diversity and inclusion training for airline staff. After some thought, she agreed. It was a voluntary position and her schedule was busy, yet she felt it was important to use her experience to make positive changes. Together, they collaborated on a training program emphasizing empathy, awareness, and strategies for dealing with unconscious bias. Over time, the program rolled out across Delta's network, becoming a model for other airlines to replicate. Naomi took quiet pride in the knowledge that, through an incident that had once caused her immense pain, she was now influencing a transformation that could spare countless passengers from discrimination. She realized that while she couldn't erase prejudice from every corner of the world, she could leave it weaker than she found it. One policy, one training session, one personal connection at a time. Discrimination can strike in even the most unexpected places, turning an ordinary moment into a flashpoint for change. Naomi Russell's turbulent flight began as a humiliating encounter, but ended up igniting a movement toward greater accountability and respect. Sometimes karma arrives in dramatic fashion, ensuring that those who inflict pain must reckon with their own actions. Ariana learned this lesson the hard way, losing what she valued most because she could not see beyond her prejudices. Yet from the same incident arose hope, a CEO determined to reshape company culture, an advisory panel guiding staff training, and a resilient woman using her platform to champion inclusivity. Naomi's journey reminds us that standing up for ourselves is not only a personal victory, but a catalyst for bettering the institutions we interact with. If you found value in this story, please like, share, and subscribe to continue supporting content that sparks meaningful conversations.